we shouldn't be alarmed, really, that Biden hasn't spoken yet with Prime Minister Netanyahu since assuming office. I think that it's probably for the best.
So I want to go across the ocean to America, because a lot of people in Israel and a lot of officials came out thanking the Biden administration for their official statement after the ICC decision, right? And I'm just going to read some of it here. Again, this is the official: opposing International Criminal Court attempts to affirm territorial jurisdiction over the Palestinian situation. That's the press statement from the State Department, right? We have, unquote, we have serious concerns about the ICC's attempts to exercise its jurisdiction over Israeli personnel. Okay, that's basically the wording of this U.S. State Department, and everyone's thanking the Biden administration for that. However, when I look at that statement from the U.S. Biden administration saying we have concerns versus Germany's official statement, the court has no jurisdiction because of the absence of the element of Palestinian statehood required by international law. Is it just me, or is there a difference in a sense of weakness in the Biden administration's response to this?
No, I think you have it absolutely right, and it's interesting. It's too bad I hadn't paid attention to that distinction. I would have mentioned it in my article, but you're absolutely right, and I think it's even more revealing when you compare the Biden administration's non-condemnation condemnation to the statements that were made by Trump administration officials, whether it's then National Security Advisor John Bolton, who addressed specifically the ICC and its political nature and its illegitimacy under American law, and its persecution of Israel specifically, or whether you're looking at statements and actions that were undertaken by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo beginning in 2019 to sanction ICC personnel. This was actually, I think, in early 2020, after Bensouda requested formal permission from the ICC judges to go after Israel on a formal basis. And it also had to do with her efforts to criminalize American soldiers for actions that they undertook during the war in Afghanistan. So, you know, when you compare the statements by the Biden administration to the statements by the Trump administration and the actions by the Trump administration, we have cause for worry about what the Biden administration is likely to do. And I don't think that it would surprise anybody if I were to wager that the Biden administration's backing of Israel is going to be less than fulsome. And here I think it's important to note that his statement, now that you've read it out to me, was actually weaker than the positions that were taken by the Obama administration regarding the ICC.
Wow.
And I think that sort of shows, you know, that the end point of the Obama administration was exceedingly anti-Israel. That was when they abstained from the UN Security Council resolution that said that Israeli presence in Judea and Samaria is a gross violation of international law, which of course it isn't. That they're starting from that point, that they are like, you know, Europe. They are embracing the idea that there's something inherently evil about Zionism, and that they're not supportive of Israel, that they have things that they have to do on behalf of Israel because it's just the way it is, but they're not, but they really oppose Israel. With these kinds of people now manning key positions in relations to both general foreign affairs and security policies of the Biden administration, specifically geared towards Israel, I think that, you know, we shouldn't be alarmed, really, that Biden hasn't spoken yet with Prime Minister Netanyahu since assuming office. I think that it's probably for the best, because it's not at all clear what we have to talk about with them at this point.
Wow. And so I just want to follow up on that official Biden administration statement, because, again, a lot of people in Israel came out saying, thank you. See, the Biden administration is supportive of Israel. how are we supposed to look at it, and what should we be should we be expecting the Biden administration to come down with a hammer on Israel all the time, or should we expect things like this where they give the words that make it seem that they're supportive, whereas in all actuality they're actually supporting this direction?
Well, I think it's very similar. We should be expecting to get an American policy or treatment of Israel that's very similar to Europe, where you have constant protestations of support and friendship for Israel. You know, and what did Obama say? We have Israel's back while he was actively stabbing Israel in the back. I think that we're going to see things like that. So, for instance, we had and I think that they're going to do things that are geared towards allowing them to use Israel as a means to legitimize various actions that are deeply hostile to Israel. So I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago or last week, I can't remember, when the word started getting out about Maher Bitar's hatred of Israel and his record of past actions to undermine Israel's right to exist through BDS. Right as those stories were coming out, you had a Mother Jones and then later NBC News story that came out calling into question the loyalty of the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber, whose name I don't remember. I think it's Neuberger, who is an Orthodox Jewish woman. And because she comes from a wealthy family, they have a family foundation that gave a lot of money to AIPAC. And so you had anonymous White House sources, that is, people inside of the administration who were calling her loyalty to the United States into question because she supports a lobby that does nothing more than support the alliance between Israel and the United States. This is an alliance, by the way, that's supported by the vast majority of Americans. So she didn't do anything illegal. She didn't do anything untoward. She didn't do anything out of the ordinary for an American Jew, certainly, and certainly not for an American, because most Americans are very supportive of Israel and of America's alliance with the Jewish state. But you had these anonymous sources who were casting doubt and aspersions on her loyalty to the United States because she's pro-Israel. And then what could you get? Then you have, after you have anonymous administration officials who are casting aspersions on her, you had a very full-throated condemnation of such allegations and support for her by the White House. And then at the same time, you had calls by progressive American Jewish organizations saying that just as we support Neuberger's appointment, so we support Maher Bitar, and we say that any allegations against him are casting aspersions on loyal American citizens, just like she's a loyal American citizen, so is he. And just as he can, she can be credentialed or judged, fairly or whatever, so can he. So that they use, I believe, and I think it's very clear that the red herring that they threw out against her was a means to legitimize him. So you're going to see a lot of that too, where you have, ostensibly pro-Jewish, pro-Israel positions being put out, but they're being put out in order to legitimize viscerally and viciously anti-Semitic personnel and probably actions by the administration going forward.
Wow. All right. That's scary stuff.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.